G'day, Flosstube, Anna, aka Morales, back with another stitching update. It is January 29th, and I actually have a reasonable sized pile of stitching progress to show you. A little bit of spontaneous haul, not that much. Although I got a real treasure coming in the mail, but that'll have to be for the next video. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to say, so let's hop into it. Oh, I should say hello, welcome. Glad to see anybody returning, anybody new, all that jazz. I do actually enjoy getting all your comments and feedback and participating in this community, so always glad to hear from you guys. Without further ado, in no particular order, because particular orders require thought and planning, and at this point we're doing good just to remember everything we did, let's grab what's on the top of the pile. The top of the pile is Aura of Otter, and after my whip parade last week, you would have seen I had finished a straight line across about there in the panel with the park bench. This particular side of the design only has a very baby page size page, and I thought, oh, well, I can knock that baby page out and, have a whole page's worth of progress in my stats, and it won't take me very long, just a day or two. Yeah, that was the plan. So the pattern was on the top, the actual stitching is done here. How organized we are. Nothing's together. And I didn't grab my board. We're winging it, guys. Nothing new there, right? For those of you returning, you would have heard that whole thing before. So this is where we're at. I'll show you, because it's on the Q snap. There's the full view. But what we've been working on is essentially that little column, and it's probably 25 stitches wide, not that much, and a full page height. Not particularly confetti heavy, no justifiable excuse, but it took me nearly a week to get that done, just simply because, I don't know, I was dawdling. I was watching TV with the kids instead of concentrating on my stitching. Other such a sordid life. No particular reason. But that officially shows you the corner of the park bench, so you can tell, a straight line, there's not actually that much park bench left to go. So a lot of this row will be background until we get to the little bit of lamp post that sticks up straight, and no doubt that is 90% just a black straight line at this point, down so low in the post. So that's Aura of Autumn by Leonid Afremov. 32 count Murano fabric, even weave. You think that's all the stats I'm supposed to tell you? I forget. So once I got that out of the Q snap, I thought I wanted to go back and do another segment on my embroidery piece. So the reminder, this is what I'm doing. The book has all the letters of the alphabet, and I'm doing the letters that spell the word beach. And because it's the beginning of the alphabet, I'm actually starting with the A. And when last you saw it, I will insert a photo. I had basically just did most of the waves. I actually found one that I'd missed, and that C down there. And now I have added all the sand. That's the wave I missed, so that wave is new. The sand has little French knots in it all the way around. And then I also added the seagulls and the little bit of running stitch in the sea. I suppose it's meant to indicate like crashing waves, things like that. So yeah, I did note, once you read the pattern properly, that the base part of the C wasn't actually meant to be done with the waves using the stem stitch. It had a different style of stitch in the pattern, obviously same colors, but a different stitch, which had more up and down sort of crisscross across the thread. At this point, there's no way I'm ripping out that C and attempting to do it with the correct stitch. So this C in the A is going to stay a stem stitch, but I will endeavor when I do the other letters to explore that other stitch, and I can't remember what the name of it was. The sand, the base darker brown, was a very simple straight stitch. Yeah, no, it's basically straight lines. No particular talent needed for that one. Obviously, then the scattering of little French knots on top of the sand. Actually, I don't know whether it's legit, whether it's just me, or whether there's something not quite right with my camera lens. So I'm going to pause it. It just seems a bit fuzzy. I'm going to pause it, clean off my camera lens, and we'll see if we can get a better picture for you guys, okay? So I don't know about you, but I reckon that definitely looks a lot less cloudy and a lot better picture. So apologies for that. Apparently I'll have to put on that on my regular prep list. Clean the camera lens. Yeah, so pretty pleased with the progress made on that. I believe the next step when I pull this back out again will be to start filling in the actual shells. So it's going relatively fast. I think it's the shells, and then these outline bits are rope. I think that's really all that's left, and then this letter will be finished. Of course, I need to repeat that process for the other 4 letters. So the entire project will take some time, but this particular letter hasn't really taken very long at all. Yeah, quite pleased with that. I reckon it took more time putzing with the setup to get that film pattern over my fabric than it did to actually do the stitching in some ways. So yeah, that was A C to Stitch is the name of the book. And it's Elisabetta Sforza that did the book. Oh, this one you would have seen in my, well, you would have seen everything in my whip parade. This one came out of the deep stash. I had zero intention of working on it when I filmed that whip parade, but because I pulled it out for the whip parade and I was having a chat with people in the comments, we have a start and a finish all in one session. So this is the pattern my mom started many years ago. All that I did essentially, we discovered when we started looking for the original pattern, somebody, I forget what it was actually called. It was not a dimensions kit. I'll link the eBay listing or an eBay listing. We found a couple in the thing below, so you can get the full details for the kit. But just looking at the preview image, I could tell that there was a run of metallics along the edges of the buildings and this top ridge that Mom had left undone. Also in the top of the teapot and at the spout. So that was relatively easy. Like, I just went and found a sort of an old gold metallic that was in my stash and whip that out really quick. Can't remember. It was a crying ink, because I've got quite a bit of crying ink floating around from the years when I used to use it. And I figured I won't use it for anything currently, so I might as well use it to finish this project. And then in the tree, it was obvious that there were a few spots, in this sort of area where she was missing maybe 24 stitches all up. And for that, I just essentially took color matched as best I could from the tree colors that were already there and randomly filled in those missing stitches. And I don't reckon you could tell. I was even impressed with the color matching. I think I did all right with that. So, but we were able to confirm with the preview that the design actually doesn't have anything in this corner, and that bottom is all finished the way it's meant to be. So that was my original concern, is if this was meant to be your traditional sort of rectangular full coverage type stitch, then obviously there would have been a lot of additional stuff to go in there. But I don't think it was. So that is done. I will have to mount it and take it back next time we go. I have put both my initials and my mother's initials down the bottom, and put the current year in there. It's funny, like, I watched my mom stitch for years, and she always put her initials in things, so I instinctively started to stitch LBK. But then I'm thinking, and I'm like, no, I do AMF, which is basically first, middle, last initial, and B is not her middle initial. I'm like, I'm sure that's right. So I had to go back and verify exactly how she initialed it. But I was right. My instinctive response, LBK, is exactly how she initialed her work, so it matches all the previous stuff. With B actually being her maiden name rather than her middle name. I'll leave that one till last. So the other one I've been putzing with is Maya's Creation. If you didn't watch the Whip Parade, my daughter is charting this one for me. It's based on a particular song and the sentiment in a song, and I will put it, link in the usual disclaimer below. So she basically set up this as a still life in our living room and drew that, and then fudged the island, our local island, into the background. So we've been working on charting that, and this is where we are up to. The wine bottle, what shows anyway, is now all complete. You can see the jar and the first of the shells. I have decided I'm going to get Gloriana, I think it's called Forest. I've used it in several of the Chatelaines, and I think it'll be good colors for the island. And so we'll do all of the island in that Gloriana. But I have to get more. I'm kind of hanging out for JK's to reopen, because I've got a list a mile long of all the things that I need to get for various bits and pieces. So, been trying to do a little bit of that every day, because it's one of these, I do a bit and then we go back and revise the pattern, and then I do a bit more, and it's a bit of a longer drawn out process than your typical just stitch a chart, even though it's not very large. So I should get another couple of threads in there and make a bit more progress. The plan is to work on the jar of shells and try and get the colors in and the back stitching, and decide which ones are background shells that are a bit fuzzy and which ones are foreground and need the back stitching and all that jazz. The other one I was working on, the other one, I lost track of how many we're up to. There's a lot of the other ones. Is the Tinktorian Mandala. Because I pulled this out for the Whip Parade, and I had finished part 2. All of a sudden I was super enthusiastic to, no, I had finished part 1, sorry. I was super enthusiastic to see what part 2 was going to bring. So we have the start of some arches, the start of the hill that's going to have the first herbs and stuff in it. I think actually these highest stitches are the herbs. And because I finished part 1 last time, I promised you guys I would give you a bit of a detailed up-close look at it. So rather than sit here and carry on about it, I will insert that segment with the up-close details here. G'day, Flosstube. As promised, bringing you a bit of an up-close look at the progress on the Tinctorium Chatelaine now that I've finished officially part 1. You can see from this, actually, I've started part 2. These outer corners and the scroll work you see is actually from part 2. So hopefully this is close enough you can actually see some of the detail. It is a bit of a struggle to make sure you're close enough to see without getting so close you get nothing in the frame. So I think I mentioned last week there was one particular bit of metallic that I'd swapped out. That was meant to be a very light silver that didn't show on this background fabric. In fact, it's the same silver that's up here, and you can hardly see that in the camera. You can see it in person, and by the time there's beads in there and stuff, I don't think it will be a problem. But there's not a whole lot of contrast there. All of this through here is the usual bunch of beads, which we'll do at the end. There must be a bead in the middle. Things to note, this is a dinky dye pearl, that really teal pearl. It's technically a bit wider than what Martina recommended. So, it's quite possible there's a bit of an overemphasis on teal because of that. I think it was this outer line was the one that was also meant to be a dinky dye pearl, but the one I bought was like massively thick and not going to work for cross stitching. So that's been swapped out for a very, very close color match, but obviously doesn't have the shine of a pearl. Yeah, so I don't know what else to tell you. All those little critters, all that over one is, I think, pretty typically Martina and requires a lot of effort, very effort intensive. But they're all done on this piece, and so I can move on to the other couple of pieces. Since we're here, you can see I've started the scroll work that goes around that border. That will, for part 2, that will come around and complete. These corners are complete except for their beads. It is worth noting when you're stitching some of Martina's designs, she will tell you to do all the cross stitches first, then go back to do the specialty stitches. Not so much in the Japanese moss garden pattern, but definitely in this one. There's a lot where you're doing cross stitch right next to a specialty stitch in the same thread. So by my way of thinking, it's more efficient on your thread usage to do them all at once than to make one pass for the base cross stitches and then come back and do your specialty stitches later. Particularly when with this this pattern, a lot of the specialty stitches seem to just simply be really elongated cross stitches like this. So that is left to right, your traditional 2 linen threads, but top to bottom it's actually 8. So it would be 4 on Ada. And it's the exact, between each one of those is a regular cross stitch. So, you know, if you were to try and do the regular cross stitches and then come back and do the elongated ones, there'd be a lot more traveling. On the flip side, you can see the variegation more or less is solid in each leg, you know, because I would have worked up and then down and then up again. Whereas if you did it in 2 passes, you might find you had dark elongated threads in the middle of light regular cross stitches. So it kind of depends what you like a bit and how variegated the thread is. You can see I've started actually with the bases and the vegetation in the arches for part 2. So part 2 also includes these 3 arches. You can just see the 3rd one over here. Obviously I've got all the base sides done. The top is, you know, only halfway over 1 arch. At this point, it's probably not overly clear. Put my hand in there for reference. So, you know, I'm about a hand's width from the top of the fabric. So I must be getting pretty close to the top of the design. I can't actually remember whether I calculated 2 or 3 inches on the border area, but you know, there's not that many inches left to go, so the actual pattern can't come up that much farther. Of course, I haven't actually gone to investigate that. A lot of this is the called for variegated threads. I note there's not a great deal of contrast between my fabric color and the thread. I actually think that'll be all right once you get all of the hill and the back stitching and stuff in. So I'm not too worried about it at this point, but those colors are very light against this light purple fabric. It was actually, when I dyed it, it was really, really purple, but the more pink I put into this piece, the more it looks pink to me. So I think that's just a fluke of the colors. There's a whole bunch of back stitching and detail and stuff to go in those sort of ivy trellis type areas. Yeah, so I think these arches are actually going to take a fair bit of time, despite, you know, I've been working on this for 2 weeks and it looks like I've made a lot of progress. But there is a deceptively large amount of stitching just in the base hill, not to mention the actual herbs and stuff that sit within the arch. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that bit of a close-up, and I will see you back in the main video. So hope you enjoyed that. One last look at the overview. Yeah, I mean, all these Chatelaines are so beyond awesome that, you know, I could just stargaze at this all day. This is stitched on a 28 count cashel. All the Chatelaines are dyed in a sort of light purple color by myself, just grit dye. So nothing fancy there. And I didn't think to mention before the piece that Maya designed for me, the white wine, that is just done on a scrap of probably 28 count cashel. I expect it's an offcut from one of the Chatelaines I've prepped. So at some point I ended up sitting in town for a couple hours waiting on a kid, and I think I was actually waiting on Maya, and so this is her Mermaid, Enchantress of the Abyss, Bellafilipina designs, and so because I was waiting with her, she wanted me to take her Mermaid, and it got a little bit of stitching. I think it might have actually gotten some in the evenings too. So I'll insert a before picture, but this actually has a fair bit of progress in the skin. I don't think any of the skin was there before, and she's now got 2 distinguishable arms and a bit of a neck, plus all the treasures and leafy stuff she's holding. I am missing still some of the metallics that go in that leafy treasure stuff. So until that shows up, there's probably going to be a bit of a gap in there. But I was trying, the idea was basically to work through this a little bit to get into her tail and see how the tail colors are coming out. But I thought for not much time, that's actually quite a good amount of progress. And there's the entire fabric piece, so it's one of those gradient ones. This is an Under the Sea Fabrics 28 count opal called Midnight Mermaid, so very fitting for a mermaid. And the last thing I worked on is actually a brand new start and haul altogether. This unexpected start actually originated because I was sitting on Virtual Stitchers, and Vicki Stitch and Button, I'll link her channel below, was starting a Lena Lawson project and having a bit of a whinge about the chart and it being color and hard to read. And I was quizzing her on, you know, whether that was standard for the Lena Lawsons or whether she just got a cruddy chart for that one. And we got to talking that I'd been looking for this Trick or Treat chart. This was actually on order with JK's for ages, but it wasn't coming from the wholesaler. So I'd kind of given up on it, but it turns out Vicki had a copy of said chart, and she was very kind enough to loan it to me. I gather she's got several others that she's going to stitch, so she can wait a bit for me to finish this one. And she sent it all the way across the world to Australia so that I could stitch it. So yeah, I wanted to get that one essentially started and in progress ASAP so that I can get the chart back to her. I initially, looking at the chart, I thought, oh, it's only, you know, 3 relatively small pages. This should be a piece of cake. Whip it out really fast. Yeah, the number of blended threads in that little 3 pages in fiddly bits, it's not going to be quite as fast as I had envisaged in my head. So once that showed up, the million-dollar question was what to do as far as the fabric. And I knew I didn't want to wait to order anything in, so it's a matter of, you know, what do I want to dye myself. And I kind of debated, you know, a stormy gray would be a nice, safe dye. And in fact, I dyed the stormy gray and this one I'm going to show you. And the stormy gray, it was lovely fabric, it turned out great, but I figured it would be more easily reusable at a different project, so I will save that one for another day. And I ended up going with this one, which didn't quite turn out how I had anticipated. When I'd been Googling, I'd been looking at, you know, completions that other people had done. Somebody had done this on a really dark, it was dark blacks, browns, and it had bright pops of oranges in it, and it looked really nice. So this was my attempt to replicate it, which is nowhere near as bright, and the pops of oranges are just not, like they are there, you can see them in person a little bit, but they're not bright orange, they're, yeah. So I wouldn't say that whole dyeing experiment was a raving success, but I do think it's a reasonable color to put the pattern on. I think it'll work well enough. So that's what I've gotten done so far, which is basically his little feet or legs and a bit of his coattails, the inner shadows. And the only reason I put him away at the time was because I was working down here at the ends where it's the little bit of straw coming out of his pants. You know, words are really hard, guys, really hard. And I was missing one of the colors, and I was thinking back, like, obviously once I saw this pattern ages ago, thought that's really cool and wanted it and ordered it, but then I haven't really studied it in detail since. And so in my head, I'd put all sorts of gold metallics and stuff in the pattern that aren't actually there. But now I'm thinking I should take a bit of the same old gold that I used in Mom's project and just do little bits of gold at the end of the straw peeking out of his arms and legs, and maybe, you know, a bit of something in his jacket just to bling it up a little bit. So I haven't added anything like that yet, but watch this space. We may be just kind of making things up and blinging it up as we go. So that's probably 2 or 3 days progress. Not a great deal of stitching, but there's an awful lot of color changes and blends in there. And in fact, I ended up, because there were so many blends with relatively little usage, I ended up hauling out my Teresa Wentzler thread sorter thing. And the idea is when I have a blended bit of thread that I'm not going to finish up where I'm at, I just wrap it up and mark it in one of the little slots. And then I write the number that that thread is stored in on the chart. So that, you know, when I go to find it next time, I can see, oh, there's a number there, grab it off the thread sorter, rather than getting more thread out when it's already ready to go. So there's that. When Vicky sent me that chart, that same day in Virtual Stitchers can be very dangerous, guys. I better remove that chart so you can't actually see it when I hold this up. Vicky was showing us some of the project bags that she had lined up to make. If you want a heads up and an early in on Vicky's project bags, Virtual Stitchers is a very good spot to hang around. And she was making a project bag with this Jack Skellington fabric, his skull face on the inside. And so as soon as I saw that, I thought that, you know, the Trick or Treat pattern and this, they've totally got to go together. I mean, that is so cool. Yeah, so this showed up in the mail, and both my daughters tried to make off with it. So I have to protect this one and hide it because it's mine. They can't have it. Anyway, I will link, like I said, Vicky's stuff below. So you check her out if for some reason you don't actually know her. I think that's it for me. Yeah, I think that's everything. So I will leave it here. I hope everybody has a good, safe, productive couple of weeks, and I will aim to check in with you in the usual 2 weeks. See you then. Bye.